All right, welcome back to another episode of the Podium Pusher podcast. As you guys know, we've already released an episode this week. Didn't plan on doing a second one, but Formula One has blown up over the past 48 hours. We decided that we had to have an emergency podcast before the weekend started. Brandon, we've got a lot to talk about today. How you doing?
Doing great. Love a good reason for an emergency pod. So we just couldn't not talk about the Haas livery launch today. So yeah, I mean that's what we're gonna spend the next half hour or so talking about. So we're just gonna break it down, angle by angle. We're just gonna talk about the Haas car. It's gonna be great.
I guess we can talk about it for a second. I totally forgot that was happening with all the other stuff. And then I woke up this morning and saw a Haas livery and was like, oh yeah, that was happening. It looks fine. I mean, it looks like all the other cars moving towards more carbon fiber. It's probably nicer than last year's was, in my opinion. Not as nice as the US Grand Prix was. I think it looked nice when it had the stars and stuff for that. They probably could have leaned more into the American side if they wanted to, but the concept looks more like a Red Bull car, but they probably still got it wrong. It'll be at the back of the grid anyways.
Yeah, it's definitely more exposed carbon fiber, but which is unfortunate. I wish they'd kind of take the paint livery weight out of the car total weight regulation, so that way we'd have more cool liveries. But I understand that we're not talking about liveries, we're talking about racing. So
all you have to do is say minimum 5 kilograms of paint on the car and it's fixed. But we don't get to make those decisions. But that's not really what we're talking about today. We're talking about the crazy silly season moves that have happened. It's January, now going into February, and silly season has already started. I woke up to the craziest thing that I could have ever seen on my Instagram feed. And as you guys know, we're from America, so we're like 6 hours behind when all this stuff kicked off. We woke up and the day started, and I texted Brandon, hey, we might have to do an emergency podcast. He's like, oh, why? I was like, oh, well, Lewis Hamilton's going to Ferrari. And it hadn't been confirmed at that point, but it was far enough in the process to where we were getting it from reputable sources. Brandon, what was your initial reaction to seeing that Lewis Hamilton is signed with Ferrari?
I was just shocked. I wasn't gonna believe it until it was confirmed. But I mean, the more you texted me immediately, kind of got on Instagram to see like who was posting it on Instagram, like relatively reputable sources. And I was like, okay, this might be a real possibility. Check the F1 app. Obviously, there's nothing there. There are lots of post things. They want it to be actually confirmed. And I checked the Score app, see what the news is on there, and like the Score has already written a piece on it. And I was like, all right, well, at this point, then it's pretty much as good as a done deal. So I mean, yeah, I was just shocked. That's one of those truly iconic moments in a sport where it's like, where were you? Where were you when, I don't know, Tom Brady decided to move to the Buccaneers, from the Patriots? I mean, I truly feel like this is one of those moments. Where were you when Michael Jordan decided to retire from basketball and play baseball, or retire from pro baseball and come back to playing basketball? You and I weren't alive for those moments, but I imagine that to be a similar feeling to what we experienced as F1 fans, when that was announced. So I mean, I was just in shock. I didn't really know what to think of it, but I've had some time to think about it, and it's still just as crazy. So
I know it doesn't feel real. I feel like since I've been a Formula One fan in 2018, there's always been the rumors of like, oh, when his contract's out with Mercedes, Lewis is going to go drive Ferrari. Like Ferrari was always the other team that was rumored with Lewis Hamilton, but it just felt like Lewis's loyalties to Mercedes and to Toto and just that brand were so strong. I mean, he had stock in like companies that were associated with the team. Like I just assumed that he would finish his career with Mercedes, and I just can't believe it. Statistically, the greatest driver of all time, maybe overall the greatest driver of all time. We won't get into that today, but it's just like with the biggest brand in Formula One, it's crazy. It's crazy. But we've got some specific things that we can break down to get more into this. So, like, why would he sign that contract now? I mean, it's before testing, before the car was even unveiled. He signed it for 2025. We haven't even put a singular lap on track with a 2024 car. Why sign now?
To be honest, I don't really know. From Ferrari's standpoint, it makes sense to sign Lewis as soon as you can. You know, if you're truly wanting to go after him, you got to get him locked down as quickly as possible, because if somebody else hears that he's potentially on the move, you never know what could happen. Obviously, I don't think any team outside of Ferrari has the kind of draw to Lewis that Ferrari does. But again, you never know what could happen. Lewis is a 7-time world champion, so if there's potential that he's on the move, everybody's going to want a chance at that, right? So I think from Ferrari's standpoint, it makes sense to sign him as soon as they could. But from Lewis's standpoint, honestly, I don't really know. I mean, he's still got a full year left on the contract, obviously. Who knows? Maybe he would have, if he could have, maybe he would have broken the contract earlier. I know that there was a break clause in his contract, which is how he was able to sign for 2025 in the first place. The contract he signed last year with Mercedes was a multi-year contract. So I don't really fully know why for Lewis it makes sense to sign it before the 2024 season starts. But I think at this stage in his career after 2024, now is the time to do it if he was going to do anything like that. He's definitely getting older, and I don't think he's lost anything in terms of his ability to race. But if he's going to make a move to another team, now would be the time to do it before his twilight years are upon.
Yeah, this definitely feels like the time to make that last big career move for Lewis. He's still got some years left. There's still the feeling that he can win that 8th world title. Part of me thinks, being such an experienced driver and having won so much and then had this drought of not winning over the past few years, that I think he might have seen something in the data, seen something, on the simulator with the car for this year and been like, man, Mercedes is not figuring it out, and they're not on a trajectory to figure out these new regulations anytime soon. And so I don't know if that was more of Mercedes not looking promising, or Ferrari showing him something promising, showing them that they were moving in the right direction, or even just the chance to get to drive for Ferrari and maybe win a championship with them before he retires. But there is part of me that thinks, with Lewis having so much experience, that he saw something in the data that made him a little concerned with the future of where the Mercedes car was going.
Absolutely. That definitely makes sense. And I mean, even that was alluded to a little bit last year of how, 2022 obviously didn't go as planned with the new regulations. We roll into 2023, second year of the new regulations, even worse, right? Not great. So how are they taking a step forward? And Lewis, if anybody can look at the car and know, or look at the data and know, it's going to be Lewis. He's been driving the Mercedes for 11 years. This will be his 12th season with them, I think. So he's got a lot of experience and knowledge in that area, and maybe it was just time for him to part ways and just at least get a new change of scenery, see if somebody else can figure it out better than Mercedes can.
Man, it felt like we would never say that sentence. The Mercedes and Lewis dominance, that felt like it was going on forever, and now it's like truly over. Like they're departing. It doesn't feel real. Like we're sitting here talking about this, and like the sentence isn't coming out of my mouth. It does not feel real. I tell you who else it probably doesn't feel real for is Charles Leclerc, because like 2 weeks ago, he signed a contract that was for beyond 2024. We don't know for how many years. I would assume at least up until the new regulations is what I would assume that it would have been for. So in the 2025-26. So you get this big contract, you get paid all this money. Ferrari saying, you are the number one driver. We're putting our hope in you. They didn't extend Carlos at that time. I don't know why, but they put all that money into Charles, and then 2 weeks later, the statistical greatest driver of all time is now going to be your teammate. And Lewis isn't coming in to be the number 2 to Charles Leclerc. Like, they didn't call up Lewis Hamilton and be like, hey, how would you feel about being a number 2 driver and moving over for a 26-year-old Charles Leclerc? Like, how do you feel about that? He's coming in to be the number 1 driver and to win races and win world championships. So, man, I put Charles at a tough spot for sure.
Yeah, it's just an interesting move, with Ferrari. I mean, I understand the opportunity to get Lewis is something that, no team could pass up on. But I think they really spurned both of their current drivers. To what the point to what you said is Charles probably got to feel terrible, and this will be his second time being a teammate with someone who's won multiple world championships, and I can imagine it wasn't easy to be Sebastian Vettel's teammate when Sebastian was fighting Lewis for world titles. That obviously didn't work out, but now Charles is going to be teammates with Lewis, and we'll see how it goes. But also for Carlos, it's just got to be awkward for him the entire season. But I guess we'll see how he does.
Yeah, we will see how it goes for Carlos Sainz. I can't imagine even like showing up for testing. Like, he's probably still off doing his winter training, so he might not even be back in Maranello at the factory yet. Like, what is walking in for the first time after that mean? But go ahead and talk about Carlos Sainz a little bit more and what's next for him. Obviously, we did our silly season predictions. That was the last podcast that we did before this, and I think both of us predicted he would stay at Ferrari for another year. I know I did. I'm pretty sure you did as well. Clearly, that's not happening. What does he do from here?
I mean, I don't know. It's this Lewis's move really throws a whole wrench into the entire silly season thing. It kind of just blows it up. But I mean, there's a couple options. Carlos has been rumored to have signed pre-signed a contract to race for Audi when Audi enters in 2026. So that's rumor has been out for, I think, a while now. I've been seeing it for a while. So I guess there's potential there. We talked about Guan Yu Zhou leaving after this season. So, I mean, that would open up a seat over at Kick Sauber, big F1 Audi, Alfa Romeo Formula One team. So, I mean, that's an option, but, there's also a lot of other seats that are going to be open. And, a couple at the two of the top teams, Mercedes and Red Bull, that maybe Carlos could take a shot at. I don't know. What do you think?
Man, I think it's definitely interesting. I think there's no way that Carlos Sainz isn't on the grid in 2025. Like, I think he will find a seat somewhere. He's an established driver. He was the only non-Red Bull driver to win a race this year. He proved that he could be a match for Charles Leclerc on many occasions, who's considered one of the best drivers on the grid right now. Like, I think for sure he's got to get a seat. I think if he wants it, that Audi seat is probably there for him a year early. Like, I think instead of Valtteri Bottas and Teo Pourchaire, I think they would easily say Carlos Sainz and Teo Pourchaire. Like, that's the stronger lineup at the moment. It would help them more moving forward into the Audi transition, 2026 new regulation. So I think if he wants it, that seat is there for him. But I also think there probably is that hesitation in his mind of like, if I go in 2025, like, that for sure is going to be a blip on the radar in my career. Like, he's probably going to score like 13 points that year and finish 15th, 16th in points, just because that's where that car is going to be that year. And there's really no guarantee that the Audi thing even brings success in 2026. So if the option to get the Mercedes or the Red Bull is there, I don't think there's anything that would necessarily stop him in his mind from taking that seat. I don't necessarily think that he'll get the Red Bull seat. I guess there will always be the rumors because he was a Red Bull driver at one point, but I know he kind of ended his time with Red Bull not on the best of terms, of already being loaned out to Renault and then picking Pierre Gasly over him for the replacement of Daniel Ricciardo, he and his management didn't like that much, and he decided to leave the Red Bull program to go with McLaren. And he and Max Verstappen didn't get on super well when they were teammates at Toro Rosso. So I think the Red Bull management would want to protect Max and his feelings and not sign Carlos Sainz. So I really don't see a path to Red Bull at the moment. And then Mercedes, I guess there could be a straight swap. Like when you look at drivers who will be available to replace Lewis Hamilton, Carlos Sainz is among the most accomplished, if not the most accomplished. So I could see it, but I also think that there's so much talent in the Mercedes pipeline that they might not want to get Carlos Sainz. They might want to promote from within, whether that be, moving Frederick Vesti up earlier than I thought they would, or Kimi Antonelli being the next Max Verstappen and getting thrown in at 19, 20 years old to the top team. So I don't know. I think there's definitely going to be seats available for Carlos. I think the Sauber Audi seat is probably the most likely destination, but I think there'll be seats available for him for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree. I think there's, Carlos is one of the, I think one of the best drivers on the grid right now. And, he has proved time and time again that while maybe he isn't able to, I don't know, secure as many pole positions or wins as Charles, he's been a very, very consistent driver and, proved to be an even match with Charles, I think, pretty solidly over the last 2 years. So, yeah, I think there's no way he's not on the grid. And I think that, I agree that the Audi Sauber seat is probably the most likely, but, there's always a possibility for others. And, Mercedes is in kind of desperate times right now, I would think. So to be able to secure one of the top drivers on the grid, the only driver who beat Red Bull last year, might be too big of an opportunity for them to pass up. And, maybe they ship Carlos off after, 2025, ship him off to Audi and, bring up Frederick Vesti or Kimi Antonelli or someone else, but time will tell. We'll see.
Here's another piece of crazy silly season move, kind of unrelated, but still in the dominoes to this. I don't know if you saw this today. Have you seen the rumors that Alex Albon has signed a contract for Red Bull in 2025?
I hadn't really, I mean, I'd seen maybe a couple of things like, Alex potentially, back to Red Bull in 2025, but like nothing serious. It was more like memes really rather than serious posts, but that would be insane. I think that'd be crazy.
Yeah, I've seen multiple things today that have said that he signed a 3-year contract for Red Bull starting in 2025, which would be crazy. I don't think it's real. I think there's no way that happens. I mean, he was already in the driver program race for the top team, and then they booted him out. And like when they have Yuki and Liam and Daniel already in the fold, I can't see them going outside to get Alex Albon. He's been good at Williams, this past year, but I don't think he was good enough to be like, man, he needs to be in a top team right now. Like he's changed. He'll win a world championship in a top team. Like I don't think his performances were that outstanding. And so I can't see that happening.
I don't see that there's any way that would happen. I don't like if say Yuki or say Daniel retired, whatever, but no longer an option. Yuki, maybe moved on to somewhere else, or maybe Yuki was still there, and I don't know, Liam decided he wanted to do like Formula E, something. Like if those options weren't around, or even if like Liam and Daniel were gone and Yuki was still an option, I could see that potentially happening. Because I feel like Yuki is maybe only a slight step above Alex. Like Alex is obviously a little bit more mature than Yuki. He's raced for Red Bull before. Yuki has never done that before. So maybe that would be like a comparable, risk for them to take if Daniel and Liam were options. But, I think there's no chance that would happen. And if they were to sign Alex Albon, it definitely wouldn't be for a 3-year contract. It would be probably a shorter term contract to see like, okay, is this going to work out or not? Or, you know, are you just going to, you know, play around in the Red Bull car like you did last time and we're going to send you back? Or, um, you know, I think they would have a shorter leash on him than a 3-year contract. I mean, that's a big commitment from Red Bull, which is a team that doesn't necessarily like to make big commitments to their second drivers, which is what Alex would be.
Yeah, I think it would be crazy for him to go back. I think he's probably more likely to go to Mercedes than he is to go to Red Bull. Obviously, he's racing with Williams that has the ties to Mercedes. We know that he and George get along well. I think it would make more sense that if he was going to go to a top team, which I think he would perform well at, I think it's more likely to be Mercedes. But it's still that thing where you think, like, if you're Mercedes, do you truly believe that Alex Albon can replace a 7-time world champion and bring at least comparable levels of success? Doesn't even have to be the same. No one's going to bring them the same level of success that Lewis did, but it's going to be success that's comparable, and that's just not a comparison I'm ready to get behind yet in my mind. So I don't know.
Yeah.
It's tough. It's tough.
I mean, I could see them. I could see Mercedes potentially again taking Alex on, but in a short-term capacity. I mean, because like you said, they have so much talent in their pipeline. I mean, the Mercedes pipeline, and the Red Bull pipeline, and the Ferrari pipeline are, I think, the 3, you know, pipelines with the most talent in them. And you know, there's no reason to sign Alex Albon to a 3-year contract when you've got, you know, 3, probably 4, you know, drivers who could step in and maybe not at the works team at Mercedes, but into a Formula One seat and perform. Doesn't really make a lot of sense. So, but I don't know. We'll see. This has opened up a whole new world of possibilities. So
It really has. It really has. Part of me wonders if they would put him in for 2025, give him a 1-year contract, and be like, if it works out, that's awesome. If not, they had one of their juniors replace him at Williams for that year, and they're going to be the long term in 2026 going into the new regulations. I could see Alex maybe being a bridge driver in that situation, but I think Alex Albon is definitely probably going to be one of the next pieces to fall. He'll be in that driver market. You know, his contract ends in 2024. So I think, you know, once he and Carlos maybe announce their seats, we'll start to see the pieces come together a little bit more.
yeah, I think those guys are 2 of the best drivers that are available now. So we'll see. And then who knows? Maybe for this year, Checo decides, you know, jump over to Mercedes and see what he can do there. Maybe. Just a wild prediction. Thought I'd throw it out there.
That would be insane. Yeah, he's still going to retire after this year. Sorry to burst your bubble. This is Sergio Perez's last season in Formula One, without a doubt. All right, with all of this craziness happening, it throws out our predictions that we just made like a week ago completely out of the window. We're already like gonna get less than half of them right because this happened. We didn't even have Lewis Hamilton on our list because this wasn't even a possibility in our minds. So for the sake of redemption, I've given us a chance to make one more silly season prediction. It's going to be big. It's going to be bold. This is our chance to redeem ourselves in the future. What is your new biggest silly season prediction?
My new biggest silly season prediction is that Charles Leclerc will not finish his current contract at Ferrari. We don't know how long his current contract with Ferrari is. I think, you know, what you said earlier through like 2026 is that it's a pretty good guess. And I think that's probably what it is. I can't imagine Charles wanting to commit much longer than that to Ferrari because, you know, there's a big possibility that they don't get it right with new regulations in 2026. And Charles doesn't want to be locked up till, you know, 2028 with a team that can't figure it out. But I think my prediction is he's not going to finish the current contract. I think him being vaulted down to the number 2 slot, it's going to cause a lot of tension between him and Lewis. I think Lewis is going to come in guns a-blazing and want to really influence the car. Maybe that's something that he wasn't getting at Mercedes. You know, he has expressed frustration with how they developed the car and not taking some of his suggestions on. So maybe Ferrari promised him that or gave him that, and, you know, if Lewis is going to be influencing the car, Charles won't be. So I think Charles is not going to be very happy after 2025, and we'll see. We'll see. But I can't imagine him finishing his current contract in Ferrari. I think he'll go somewhere else.
Yeah, in my mind, it has to be a feisty relationship between Charles and Lewis at some point in 2025. Charles is known to be feisty and emotional behind the wheel, and it's not like he's been a bad teammate in the past, but he has argued against team orders that have been issued to him in the past, just out of his raw emotion and desire to win for Ferrari, and like the loyalty and desire to win a championship that he has to that brand. And so it'll be really interesting to see how that passion he has collides with Lewis's talent and experience and legacy and everything that he brings to the team. Like, whether it be all like in their mind type clashing or actually physically on the road, just there's no way that relationship doesn't deteriorate somehow in my mind. Like, it's a fine balance between having a super strong driver lineup and having a driver lineup that's going to like clash with each other. And in my mind, there's some time that they're going to clash. And then if you're Ferrari, who you got to let walk? Charles Leclerc, who's great, but hasn't won a world championship, or Lewis Hamilton, who's won 7 and is maybe the best driver of all time? The answer's obvious. So yeah, I could definitely see that happening for sure. My new biggest silly season prediction is that Mercedes will have 2 new drivers in 2025, which is crazy because obviously George Russell is under contract as well. But with Lewis leaving, it really, really throws everything into a loop. And I don't know if George Russell has done anything so far to say that he's the future. Everyone thought that whenever he was in Williams that he was going to come up to Mercedes and be there for a little bit, and then Lewis would leave and he would be the new golden boy. And if you based it strictly off the results from this past season, I don't know if George is ready to be that number 1 driver and could lead Mercedes to championships if they've had that championship winning car. We've seen mistakes, him crashing on his own in races. I think of Canada when he was pushing to try and be on the podium and just crashed on his own, ruined his race, lost a lot of points for the team. And so I think if George doesn't really step it up in 2024, then I don't know if there's anything stopping Mercedes from getting a Carlos Sainz to be their reliable driver and bringing up one of their young drivers along him, or getting a Daniel Ricciardo to be the number 1 driver, right? And getting a young driver, to go alongside him. I think there's definitely other options that are at least comparable. And I would argue that Carlos Sainz is racing at a higher level than George Russell is right now. So if Mercedes aren't convinced that George Russell is going to be their guy for the future, then I don't see why they wouldn't go ahead and make the jump, since their team is already going to be in so much flux.
And I haven't really thought about that, but we can't rule anything out at this point. And I mean, that makes a lot of sense. George Russell is he's just another piece of the puzzle. And if Mercedes doesn't see him continuing to take steps forward, then no reason to keep him. And you might be able to get somebody else who could push the team forward more and help lead a younger driver better. So, an interesting thing to think about, but I could definitely see that happening. It's a bold prediction, but I think it's a good one.
That wraps up all of the craziness that has been going on in Formula One over the past 48 hours. Who knows? We could wake up tomorrow and have a need for another emergency podcast, because even though we are still about a month away from the first Grand Prix, silly season is well and truly upon us, which means Formula One in 2024 is back. I'm so excited. I just love this sport. It's awesome. Brandon, what are your parting podium thoughts for these people before we get on out of here?
Parting podium thoughts is, man, we're here. It started. Thought today was going to be the first official day of the Formula One season. In my mind, it's usually like the first car launch, like the first livery launch. Like, all right, we're back. Like, we made it. We did it. But, Lewis decided to throw us for a loop and start the season a day early. So I know McLaren launched their livery like 2 weeks ago, but they didn't really care. It was kind of a surprise. Took us off guard. But, yesterday we're back. We're here. Lewis is a Ferrari man starting next year. So can't wait to see all the awkwardness and tension that causes for the entire season among both of those teams. So it's going to be great. It's just another reason to love Formula One is the craziness that can happen literally at any time, including while you're asleep.
Formula One truly is one of the best sports in the world. So glad that we get to be here and talk about it. It is just the most fun. And I wouldn't be surprised. We're still a couple weeks away from testing. We might have some more bombshell news to talk about before then. Wouldn't be surprised if that happened. And if it does, we'll be here to talk about it. Brandon, as always, thanks for taking the time out of your day to talk about this. Find us next week for another episode of the Podium Pusher Podcast. You guys are the best for listening. Thank you so much. See ya.